Thank you for coming. I was so pleased to hear Joe end part of his keynote by saying, boy, don't we all feel really burnt out lately? The only thing he could have said that would have been cooler is, and there's a talk on this in 10 minutes that you should all come to. My name is Matt. I'm a chaos specialist at Google. I lead the Americas region of our security response team, and that's the crisis management and digital forensics team that investigates security intrusions at Google.
My name is Johan. I work on the EMEA team, so based in Stockholm, working with Matt on his team, also solving crises, making sure that bad things becomes a little bit less bad. That's what we do. I also head a lot of our open source digital forensics tooling. So on my spare time or on my project time, I do a lot of coding as well. And I've been in this game for over 20 years, up and downs, and I'm really excited to be here and talk to you about this today.
We're here to talk about operational security. So we're going to talk about burnout as it applies specifically to operational teams, incident response teams, bug bounty people who are triaging every day. But a lot of the advice should be pretty applicable to the whole security industry. This is a word cloud that I got when I asked everyone I know on social, hey, if you're operational in security, give me 3 words that describe your life on a day-to-day basis at work. And you can see some of the things that popped up: stress, repeat, exhausted, burnt, on call came up frequently. A lot of the words that people use to describe their professional life, they have double meanings, right? Sometimes they're cool. We get excited by our on-call work, excited by dealing with APTs, but they're also forces of perpetual burnout. The exhaustion, the stress, the collision of your work life into your home life. And we thought it would be really good to go through some of the things that we've done at Google over the last few years to address the burnout in our own teams. Particular to this is that unique to operational teams, unique to incident response, security teams are a final security control. So when you look at the holistic security posture of an org, there's the firewalls, there's the endpoint protection, there's antivirus, there's all kinds of these defenses that we build in. And hopefully these days, we're all building in the Swiss cheese model. You expect a security control to fail, and you expect a compensating security control behind it to succeed in a different way than the one that failed. Up to and including some places have either on purpose or inadvertently 2 endpoint control agents, one that can block things that the other one misses. But when it gets down to the very end of the control stack, when network defenses have failed, and somehow Beyond Corp has failed, and browser sandboxing has failed, and a 0-day has taken a host over, the operational responders are the last functional security defense before all of the defenses have failed. And I think that puts us in a particularly difficult situation as the human beings that have to do that job. We did an intense effort at Google at the outset of March 2020. Something weird happened around then that caused everyone to be a little more stressed out than normal. And we spent a couple of years focusing on how do people in our field get burnt out. And one of the things that we realized was there's really 2 different kinds of burnout that affect us from 2 ends. The first kind of burnout is situational burnout. And the best example that I can tell you about situational burnout comes from my time outside of Google as a search and rescue responder for a search and rescue team. We have search dogs, and the dogs are trained to do specific tasks, and they're trained in the way that you would have to train a dog. We put a person in a collapsed structure, a simulation. We teach the dogs to sniff around and find signs of a living human being. And when they find a living human being, they get a reward. They get a treat, their favorite toy. They get to play with the handler for a little bit. And we do that over and over until the dogs know with laser-like focus that if you take them to a collapsed building and they go find living people, they will get a treat. And they do really, really well at that. But we ran into a problem at the World Trade Center collapse site, because that was a collapsed building so large that it took weeks to search for any potential survivor we could search for. And after a day or 2 of the search dog handlers running across the pile trying to find people, we noticed the dogs were getting depressed. And the reason the dogs were getting depressed is they were searching and searching and searching, and they were not finding any living people anymore. And they had lost their zeal for the search, and they were distractible, and they were tired. And so on the ground, the rescuers decided we have to fix the situation. What can we do? And so they took a break, and they had some volunteers go hide in the rubble so that the search dog could find a living person, get the reward, feel some success, and then the dogs started perking up again. I'm sure some of you have been in this situation before at work, right? Where You've been banging your head against the wall for days and getting no progress, and you finally feel the win. The dogs needed it too. That situational burnout is short-term and focused on a particular situation you're in. The dogs didn't want to stop being search dogs after they got back from 9/11. They were just burned out in the moment. Johan has a different perspective. He's going to tell you about chronic burnout.
Yeah, so chronic burnout is more the feeling of this job is burning me out, right? I'm tired of this job. I do not want to do this job anymore. And then it's gone pretty far, right? And the way you get there is that compounding all of these situational burnout signs and symptoms, and we're going to get to them later on in this presentation, but they compound into something more big and something more difficult to control and difficult to fix as well. I live close to some of my surroundings and my personal life is healthcare workers, and they have similar issues and similar problems. They're very passionate about their job, right? They want to help their patients. They want to treat everyone with the same care, the same level of excellence in their care, and they want to make things better for people, right? But when they get a feeling of, I'm not controlling my world, maybe I get priorities set down on me, maybe we get less resources, but we get more patients to treat, then that becomes really a snowball effect down to kind of chronic burnout scenarios. And InfoSec is similar, right? We're very passionate about what we do. The stakes are pretty high. We want to make our users safe. We want to make our companies safe, our organizations safe, make everything better, right? So the stakes are high, but that combined with losing control over your world, losing control over your situation, maybe someone else is dictating what you're supposed to do, that together becomes a chronic burnout kind of path to that part.
Yeah, in terms of chronic InfoSec burnout, real quick audience poll. Raise your hand if you've ever been in a team chat, discussion, or a social media post where somebody says, I want to stop being in security and go be a farmer. All right, so I grew up in a farm community, and I'm going to tell you, farming sucks. It is hard. The animals are jerks, and they stink, right? But it says a lot about our chronic state of burnout that we're like, should I be knee-deep in animal poop all day, or would I rather do one more security accreditation exercise? I'll take the animal poop. So some of the things we've observed at Google that lead to burnout that we'll cover. Now, I do want to do an important caveat. Although I have been the subject of discussion probably by many psychotherapists, I am not one. Neither is Johan. We're talking about the things that we've observed as practitioners. This isn't a clinical thing, and there may be things we've missed. But I want to start with lack of control.
So lack of control, and I mentioned this just, right? But lack of control is many different things. But there's some science here, and also what leads to burnout can be you're not control of your incoming work. As an incident responder, you're not by definition, right? We get all of the escalations and everything down the line that is we're supposed to take care of, right? But when you're not in control over the priorities of that, or what you're supposed to prioritize over other stuff, and you are not empowered to do that, that is a good way of going down a bad path of that. The other one that is very close to me is when you're not empowered to fix your world on a technical basis as well. So, tools are broken, and don't take me wrong, in incident response and especially digital forensics, everything is always kind of broken, right? Maybe you need support for that file format. Maybe you have a parser that doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And that's fine, right? That's our world. But if you cannot fix that, if you're not empowered to fix your tools, and not empowered to fix your world and make it better next time, then it becomes a source of frustration. And that source of frustration really is very close to a source of a lot of stress for you. So be able to fix your stuff, that's really important. Also poor teamwork with partner teams. If you're a large enough organization, maybe you have a few product teams, different departments. If you have not good relationships with a lot of them, it can become hard, right? And especially if you have like repeated incidents from a specific team that maybe gatekeeps access to the data that you need in order to do your job. And if that is repeatedly happening, that has also been seen, we can see that as a sign of frustration. And again, frustration is a bad sign. If you see that, you should take a step back and assess, right? Also, I want to talk a little bit about being not in control over your day-to-day investigative work. So as an incident responder, when I'm on operations, we do have playbooks. Playbooks are really important. Response plans, extremely important. Also checklists, right? I like to be able to take the stuff out of my head down into a checklist and make sure that I, tick the boxes and I don't miss anything, right? Super important. It helps us stay focused on the investigation. It helps us stay consistent in our investigations. Super important. But if they are too prescriptive, there's a chance that your team or you will just follow the playbooks step by step, and when you're done, right? When it comes to security incident response, that's almost never the case, right? You need to be creative. You need to be able to look at the incident from above and see, like, what can I do? What do I need to do in this special case, right? But if they are too prescriptive, it will force you to, or it will get you to be non-creative and just tick the boxes, and that also leads you to feeling, I'm not valued. Maybe my judgment is not valued. I'm just following the playbooks. And that is also a sign that is you need to really look at and take a step back.
So another big one that we've seen crop up from time to time is when a team has an unclear mission. Maybe this one seems like it would be pretty obvious. By the way, we did let algorithms generate all of our slide pictures, some of which turned out great. Others were which, like, that was the best we could do. So unclarity of mission, right? We generally know what we're here for. We're here to protect the systems. We're here to protect the users. But we can lose sight of that in light of interrupts-based work. So interrupts-based work, for example, I'm in incident response and I'm here to protect the users, but I also need to sign off on our incident response plans for, your European regulation, right? Or American regulators or Indian regulators. We get a lot of interrupts work that isn't related to the core mission. And it can be easy to lose sight sometimes of what is it that I'm actually here for. Am I here to fill out accreditation paperwork, or am I here to protect the users? So I do a lot of reiterating to Google people across our team and even across the Google developer community, hey, at the other end of every Android phone and every Chrome browser is a person. And the things that they're trying to put in their browser or in their phone, that means a lot to them. So keeping it there, keeping it secure, keeping it safe means up to like life-threatening consequences if we fail to do it. And so we reiterate that very often to our team. Hey, we're here to protect users. That is the mission. If you're doing things that are counter to the mission, we should talk about how to not do those. But if you're doing too many things that are unaligned with protecting the users, we need to try to make sure that we minimize those or find other teams to handle accreditation or talk to management about prioritization and make sure that people know what it is they're here to do. Hand in hand with unclear mission is opaque management. Raise your hand if you're stressed out by opaque management. I think many of us are, right? This is different from an unclear mission. Opaque management really just means many of us who are practitioners, who are on the front line of doing the work, aren't in the room when decisions are made. And we as security people tend to be the kind of people who really want to know why. Why am I doing this? Oh, I have to start reporting if there's vulnerabilities in our kernel now. Why? Some CVE was placed on my desk and it's immediately, I have to respond right away. Why? Who made the risk decision on that? And I think when you get into the depths of management and you have to make decisions constantly all the time, because managers are very interruptful driven as well, you forget to include the why when you give the messaging to your team. And I think one of the greatest things that we as managers, forgot to mention, I'm a team manager, Johan's an individual contributor, we're like peanut butter and jelly. The most effective thing you can do as a manager is be less opaque wherever you can. If you're gonna implement a new SLO, why? What caused us to have a risk-based worry that then caused managers to have a meeting that then caused us to decide we would resolve it by X? You also get a lot of power as a manager if you do that, because surprise, we are not perfect and we make bad decisions sometimes. And if you tell people the why behind a decision as a manager, The smart ICs will tell you, that was a bad way to handle this, here's a better way. And you can pivot on those decisions. And that really does work out better for everyone, burnout-wise. Another one that we face, especially in incident response teams, is, I call it chaos on both ends. But what this really means is every human being needs a stable foundation to build on, to build their emotional safety, psychological safety, and their skills. And so if you are expected to work in a role where the role is ambiguous all the time, incident after incident, how do we resolve it? I don't know, let's figure it out. How do we resolve it? I don't know, let's figure it out. That ambiguity is a big source of stress, and that's okay. Incident responders are here to deal with ambiguity and control it. But we do that because we feel secure in our own position. And you can see if somebody starts having a difficult time at home as a manager, their performance starts to get bad in terms of their on-call work. If they're worried about their team being reorganized again, their work starts to suffer, right? And so the best thing that I can do as a manager is try to ensure that if I see operational people who are having a difficult time either with their job role or with home, they need to take a personal leave to care for a family member, my supporting on-callers in taking personal leaves when they need it and shuffling around the on-call rotation appropriately allows them to go home and make sure that they maintain that stable foundation of psychological safety they need so that when they come into work and the actual work is crazy and chaotic and ambiguous and uncertain, they can focus on the uncertainty in front of them instead of the uncertainty they're going to walk into when they get home.
All right, so unclear expectations. Going back to your incoming work and be able to control that. It's also about saying, what are we supposed to do as a team and what are we not supposed to do as a team? And again, we are the team at the end of the line. We're the kitchen sink. Whenever there is anything that people don't understand, they don't want to touch, or they don't know where to send it to, right? It comes to incident response. We will have to deal with it, right? And that's fine. But you also need to be able to say no to stuff that is out of the scope of what you're supposed to do. A very classic example of this is vulnerability management or vulnerabilities versus compromises. It's easier for an incident response team to take on the whole scope of vulnerabilities, even if they're not leading to compromises or if there's no compromise there, right? If you have a large enough organization, a large enough company, you will have, even small ones, will have dependencies on third-party applications, systems, services, and that will inevitably introduce vulnerabilities, right? There will always be vulnerabilities, that's fact of life. And here at Black Hat, there's a lot of talks about vulnerabilities, how we can exploit them, and so on and so forth, right? That's fun, and it's a very interesting area, right? But if we start treating every vulnerability as an incident, you're going to have a bad day in an incident response team because the scope is just so big, right? And you're going to end up as an investigator, as a digital forensics, you're going to go down the rabbit hole of, I'm going to prove the negative, and that's something that you really don't want to do. You want to bring back facts, and that's what you're supposed to do, and not trying to prove a negative. Because that will lead to rabbit holes that you cannot get out of, technically, and it will lead to stress and anxiety, and longer term, it will burn out your team. So if you're able to have a vulnerability team that focuses on vulnerabilities and then escalate the high priority vulnerabilities or any compromises based on those, or any exploited attempts for your organization, then they escalate that to your team, and you will have a better, smaller scope with stuff that matters, and also interesting work for your team. Because otherwise, everything becomes so much, so everything kind of becomes boring, right? It's the same thing all over again. I'm going to chase the rabbit hole again, and that becomes annoying, and people are going to start losing interest. I want to mention one more thing before the next slide here, is something called don't be a hero, or heroism, and why that is not a good thing, and how we can turn that into something good, right? So being a hero is about you see a systemic problem, but you're not fixing the systemic problem. Maybe you as a team member, you as a person, will take that on and make sure that you meet SLAs. Maybe you need to have that ticket queue down to a certain level, or the response times need to be down, right? And you're working long hours to make that happen, right? You're being a hero, and you're doing that. You're doing good job, but the wrong job, right? You should supposed to be thinking about the systemic problem instead. So one way of getting out of that, and I'm kind of cheating here a little bit, sorry about that. So we're going to get to remedies a little bit later, but this one is an extra tip, I guess. One way of getting out of this heroism thing is to let things fail, right? If the consequences are bearable, it's fine if this control fails. It's fine if this thing that happened is the consequences of that. We can deal with it, right? Then it's sometimes better to let it fail and let the organization see that we have a systemic problem. And then you get maybe, and hopefully, you will get the resources to actually fix the systemic problem instead of burning yourself out or burning your team out trying to be heroes. So that's one thing I wanted to add there. Matt, next slide.
You reminded me under unclear expectations. My absolute favorite question to get from a new lawyer we've never worked with before is, can you prove the actor didn't have a 0 day that leaves no logs? No. Is that something that you thought you would get from me? Yeah. And it reminds me of that because a lot of these things too, especially with unclear expectations, the best resolution there is good communication, right? Just come back. Hey, why is it that you think you need that? Why is there something that you've read regulation-wise where you think we have to prove negatives? You know, here is what we are capable of and can give you. How do we work together with that? For operational teams, another thing we run into often and is resource starvation, which is there is way more work than there are people to do the work. Also probably affects some of us in the audience. This is another thing that I pull from my experience as a volunteer firefighter as well to kind of take a look at. Because in the fire service, if you've ever been inside a firehouse, there's good lounge chairs and there's a TV. There's usually like either an Xbox or a PlayStation, depends on what year it is. There's sometimes a pool table if you're at a nice fire department. If you're at an underfunded one, there's a basketball hoop in the back that's missing the little net. But the thing that those all have in common is everybody understands in the fire service that when we are called out to a fire, it is going to be hard, physically exhausting, stressful, emotionally draining. And we're going to come back and we're still going to have to clean our gear, put away the hoses, refill the air bottles. Once we're done with that, though, if there's an hour and a half left in our shift, nobody from management is hovering over our heads saying, well, you're getting paid for another hour and a half. You need to be doing some work, right? We sit in the chair. We talk about what we just saw. We decompress. We try to fit in the downtime so that we are sane again when the bell goes off again. People understand this. I've never had anybody ask, why do firehouses have nice sofas? But that's not something that people understand so well in IT. You are always worried that, you know, if you get a rare moment of downtime and you play StarCraft, I think, is that still a thing? I don't do gaming. What's like a good game you might be playing? Anyone? All right, I'm going to go with Minecraft then. If you're playing Minecraft at your desk, you're always worried somebody's going to walk by and be like, well, look at this lazy slacker. I think as management especially, but as senior ICs too, we all need to do a better job acknowledging and saying to management and saying to other stakeholders, hey, this is really stressful. If you want me at 8 p.m. on a day when we've had a compromise and you need me focused on that, you need to keep me not fully occupied all the time. I need to have these breaks to decompress. As a manager of incident responders, I try to keep my people about 80% booked, which means like if I break people in, because managers have to bean count, if I break people into a 40-hour week chunk, I'm not trying to make sure they do 40 hours of work in that week. I'm trying to make sure they do roughly 32, and the other 8 is flexible time. Do something that fulfills you, code on an open source project, or if you need to not be in front of a computer anymore, go do something else. This is something companies need to do to maintain long-term expertise in security in their org, especially long-term expertise in security as it applies to their org. So, signs and symptoms of burnout. How can you tell your coworkers, your employees, and your other staff are in the middle of burnout? I'll turn it back over to Johan, our chronic burnout expert.
Yeah, so there's a lot of signs and symptoms for this, right? But I want to zoom in on a couple of them. And one of them is what we call urgency fatigue. So urgency fatigue, and I guess a lot of you kind of can relate to this, right? But if everything is high priority, then nothing is high priority, right? At Google, we have this level of things. So P0, that's priority 0. That's the highest of highest. So if everything is P0, nothing is. And the problem with this is that you start getting so much work that you are not able to kind of distinct on what is important and not. And there's a danger zone here, right? There's a danger zone when you hear yourself saying, it's probably fine. And this is a very instant response type of thing, right? But if you see an incident, an escalation, you need to figure out what happened, and you shrug and you say that this is probably fine, because I have these three things that they say are equally important and equally urgent, what I'm going to choose, so this is probably fine. The problem there is that you lose your sense of curiosity, you lose your sense of, I need to dive deep into this and really understand this and make sure that the triage is being done properly, that we are not at risk, all of those instant response traits, right? So that's a sign. If you hear yourself saying that, take a step back and say that, I wonder if you should start thinking about our prioritization. Maybe we need to talk to our management and actually make sure that not everything is urgent, because, hint, not everything is as urgent, I promise. So another, if you want to spot that in other ways, is going into meetings and the language is always urgent, right? And maybe that urgency is coming from above, or maybe it's actually now rooted in your team that everything is urgent. Take note of that. Also tickets, if tickets are always urgent in the language, the words are urgent, take note and take a step back. Because this also leads to things that are used to be fun aren't anymore. And I mentioned that earlier, right? But I really want to zoom in on that, because when you find yourself not being excited by the stuff that you were excited about before, or because this is your passion, right? We have a lot of passion and we have a lot of curiosity and we want to kind of understand things technically, right? But when you lose that, that's really a pay downwards. So I want to highlight that. But that chronic burnout, a couple of examples there. But Matt, you're going to talk about situational burnout.
Yep, I'll cover situational burnout. So situational burnout, as I mentioned before, this is short-term burnout that's very intensely felt in the middle of really serious moments. And for those of you who are wondering, whiskey and Captain Crunch is the breakfast of champions. Don't knock it till you've tried it. If you've ever been involved in a really big security incident and you don't happen to have a global on-call team, or even if you do have a global on-call team, you can find yourself putting in some extra hours. Situational burnout typically occurs when, for example, like the early days of a Log4j explosion, when nobody's sure what to do or how to get a handle on it. Companies or teams who don't have a crisis management procedure in place in advance will likely run into situational burnout from the collective effort required to self-organize one. Incident responders, especially if you have maybe 4 forensics people and there's 40 hosts that you need to do forensics on, they'll start to experience the situational burnout just from trying to deal with the overwhelming volume of data that they're dealing with. And then there's the stress factor, especially if you don't get to be in big security incidents often. It's emotionally stressful. It's kind of draining. Situational burnout is something we use an incident command system to deal with incidents at Google. We have an incident commander, and we say that a formal part of the incident commander's job is keeping stock of all of the response team and just looking for the signs of situational burnout in the response team to have people take breaks. Catch it, have them go away for 30 minutes, reassign some of the work, or even just have a conversation with them about, hey, what's burning you out right now? I had one case where somebody was situationally burnt out during an incident, and when I actually stopped and talked, I said, hey, it looks to me like you're really running red right now. What's going on? They were just late for dinner and their wife was mad at them. And I was like, okay, just go home then. Like we can shuffle around your work, and you're not going to do functional good work if you're that stressed about it anyway, because you're going to introduce mistakes.
Can I add one thing to that?
Absolutely.
Don't underestimate sleep. When you're in a situation like this and you're responding and it's very hectic, right? It's better to go home 3 hours earlier and have a good night's sleep and come back the day after than to push through those 3 hours and not get much done. By personal experience, that is true.
And since we're on the signs and symptoms, I forgot to add, my number one thing I look for to tell whether someone is situationally burnt out or not is, are they annoyed that I interrupted them about something that it was my job to interrupt them about? So if I'm asking a forensics analyst, hey, do you have an update on browser history analysis for this host? And they're like, God, I'm getting to it. They're definitely situationally burnt out, because that is the one job they were assigned. I didn't give them 50, and I'm the incident commander. I'm supposed to know this. So I really try to take stock of how are their reactions when being asked for normal things. That's my number one sign that I look for. A special note, we were going to cover this in chronic burnout, but I pulled it into a new slide because on a special note, I wanted to talk about cynicism. Cynical outlooks are a thing that destroys teams, and it spreads from one person to another. Now, we in the security industry, we love dark humor, right? You like my shirt? We like dark humor. The burning dumpster fire of love is one of our favorite icons because we realize that everything is trash all the time. And we all kind of collectively like to make fun of humor. The fire service is like that too. The probably number one stressor any fire chief has is, are the things the firefighters say around the dinner table going to get out and be heard by the public? Because you have to dark humor away the pain sometimes. But here's the difference between dark humor, which is healthy for a team, and cynicism, which will destroy your team. Are the jokes that your team is making that are kind of dark jokes about a situation or a person and their motivations? Number one thing I look for, if one of my team members is making a joke about how, you will never be able to secure Remedy, right? Haha, we're laughing at Remedy. That is dark humor, that's fun. If it's Remedy will never fix this bug because their VP won't make an extra bonus this quarter. Oh, that's cynicism. That's the poisonous stuff. Because when you start questioning the motivations of the people around you or the motivations of the people you work with, they're starting to show you that they feel alone, they feel isolated, they feel out of control. It is all of those things in one coming out. And so I refuse to allow cynicism in team chats. I will pull people aside for a one-on-one. And I'll just say, hey, dark humor is great. Questioning the motivations of our VP is not. Let's talk to them if you're wondering why it is they gave us a particular order. So on to remedies. Obviously, clarity of mission. There are direct ways to do this, telling everyone what our mission is, telling everyone what we're here for, repeating it. People need to hear it 10 to 15 times a month-ish. But there's also the indirect ways, right? We have a cool logo. We have a challenge coin. Despite the fact that challenge coin is just POG for grown-ups, these subtle reinforcements of your mission, spes concilium non est, hope is not a strategy. There are 11 things in the coin that symbolize our team. These actually mean a lot to your team. And you can infuse them with your mission over and over again so that every time they see the logo on their shirt, they're being reminded of the mission. And a hard part of that is leading by example. This is something I do. I have a team of 19. I am technically not supposed to be on call in the on-call queue anymore because when you're leading a team, you're not supposed to be neck deep in the work. But I make an example in my on-call team about once a month when somebody says, hey, I need a shift swap. Will anyone swap shifts for me? I leap in and I say, I'll take your shift for the week. And I will work at least one on-call shift a quarter so that my team can see that I will do a full week of anything it is that I would ask them to do. They'll also see how I do it, which gives me a really good chance to mentor newer team members or even experienced team members who don't get to do a certain thing often. But most of the value I get out of this is just saying, hey, when I come around you in a team meeting and say we're going to change the way we do X, I'm never going to do it in a way that I would refuse to do if I were in your seat. And I think that means a lot to the team. Insist on downtime. In the fire service, fire truck loses wheel on way to burning house. It always happens. In the fire service, we have a saying, and it's a military saying too. Schedule maintenance for your equipment, or your equipment will do it for you. This applies to people too. Sunnyvale Department of Public Safety in Sunnyvale, California, where my Google office is, are one of a few public safety departments in America that are called Unified Public Safety. And they do a really neat thing. You train as a police officer, a firefighter, and an EMT, and you pick two. And for 6 months out of the year, you're a police officer, and then they say, okay, time to be a firefighter for 6 months now. Why? Because nobody ever wrote a rap song called F the Fire Department. It takes you out of one role where you're beginning after 6 months to get burnt out in a chronic way, and maybe you're starting to deal with the public a little bit more meanly than you would because you've dealt with too many mean people this quarter, and then they rotate you into the fire department. And for fire, they rotate you into police. We do this with our people too. Insist on downtime. Give them rotations. Give them other projects to do, right? Will my video play? I think it will. So manufacturing togetherness is, I'll see if this will play. Yeah. when we're in a big security incident, lots of things happen that are bad, right? And this is an example from a security incident that my team was involved in. We spent weeks doing task after task after task trying to make things better, and we were all starting to get a little situationally burnt out, and then we had a hard drive fail. And the hard drive that failed was the master drive to a data array we were storing on a bunch of evidence on. And boy, did that make everyone angry. And we were so frustrated and situationally burnt in the moment that somebody finally had a bright idea, and they were like, hey, we're next door to a scientific shop that has liquid nitrogen. Let's try freezing this drive in liquid nitrogen and smashing it. And in the moment, the leadership thing to do was say, absolutely yes, we should do that. And we smashed our hard drive that made us mad. We found out liquid nitrogen wouldn't make it break into dust like we were hoping. And then for the rest of the day, everybody was in super high spirits. That was a loss, right? Losing that hard drive set us back by 8 hours. We needed to manufacture a way to turn that into something that the team would remember and enjoy and bring back the morale, just like FEMA had to hide people in the rubble when they're trying to get the search dogs happy again. I lost my ability to click, didn't I? Come on. All right, cool.
All right, so empowering the individual. And I know that we're getting short on time here, so we have to speed through the last couple of slides here. But I want to do a couple of points here. This is very close to me because I'm leading a lot of our tooling, our open source digital forensics tooling. And empowering the individual is about giving people space and time to do project work. Because as Matt mentioned here, right, decompression is important. When you're in this situational incident response, you are starting to burn out there, you're getting a little bit tired of that, you need to decompress. And one way of doing that is doing project work. But also project work that affects you, right? You as a person. This is going to lead to my world being better next time we do this type of incident. So that might be improving your tooling. Open source is a great vehicle for giving people a personal recognition in the community, right? So you can get your staff and your folks to have that recognition and build a brand about that. And that's a good feeling, and that brings you further. But it might also be just process improvements, right? Playbooks, response plans, make them better. User education that you pick up from incidents that can be better. Like, you can work on that. But that decompression time is important. And the other point I want to make is making sure that you give your people and your employees, the ability to grow their skills. And why is that important? It's not just like having them go to classes or learning new skills per se, but it's about giving them the sense of, I'm not stuck in my role. I can actually move. And even if they move, right, say, for example, they get interested in product security or network security or mobile security, and they find a really new passion there, that's good for the individual. They found a new thing. If you can keep them in your company and they move away from your team but to another team, you will have the best incident responders when things hits the fan later on and you need their support. They're going to be great at incident response. They're also going to be great at the subject matter that they are focusing on right now. So letting people have that feeling of I'm not stuck you will be more resilient to burnout in general. So the last slide I have, it's about postmortems and blameless postmortems and why they are good. And I always bring this up in my presentations because I think it's a good takeaway for an organization and for you to have, right? So what is blameless postmortems? It's a cultural thing started at Google from the reliability engineering culture. It's about you should never blame the person for a mistake. You should have psychological safety to make a mistake, right? You have to shift focus and shift that to blaming the organization and blaming the system instead, right? Because that way people are empowered to make mistakes, because mistakes is how we learn, and mistakes is how we build better systems, fix the systemic issues, and build more resilience into our processes, our systems, our day-to-day work, and that is really important. If you want to talk more and have more insights on that, I'm happy to talk after the talk here as well. So if you want to wrap it up.
Sure.
Matt?
As you leave this talk, the last piece is the personal factor. We wanted to really focus on the things that teams and organizations can do to prevent burnout, because burnout is something you have to begin preventing well in advance, and you have to have a plan for well in advance. It's not something that you just do once it's happened. And so I didn't want to focus on all the things the individual must do to not become burnt out. That places the blame in the wrong place. But that said, we are all varied individuals and have a hobby. Have two hobbies. Whatever it is you do, don't make security person your personality. And don't make the company you work for your personality. Because those things will change through your whole life. And you need other things that make you truly happy so that when you're in the middle of a career change or in the middle of a bad incident or in the middle of a problem, you can fall back on something that makes you happy that's not affected by all those other things. And that is the last piece of dealing with burnout that I thought was really valuable to reinforce for people. We are available for QA. I think we have to vacate the stage, but we'll hang around, and we're not that easy or that hard to get a hold of. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.